Today we're going to be looking at percentage and how to represent percents in what we call a hundreds grid. Okay, so percentage really just means out of 100. Okay, so back when you used to do a test, if you did a spelling test and you got, well, if you had to do 100 words, that's a lot. But let's say you got 65 questions right out of 100 words. That would mean that you got 100%. Okay, so sometimes we will refer to percentage as hundredths, because when we look at converting between percent and decimal, a percent converted into a decimal is usually written to the hundredths position. And we can convert our percentages between percents, decimals, and fraction form. Okay, so for example, that 65% is the same thing as having 0.65 or 65 hundredths. And as well, we could write it as 65 out of 100 in a fraction. Now we will talk more about this in a video later on, but 65 over 100 could also be put into lowest terms, where the numerator and the denominator are both divisible by 5, and when we divide out that common factor of 5, we get 13 over 20. Okay, so we can take that percentage, change it into a fraction, and then also put it into what we call lowest terms. Okay, so let's look at how we're going to use this percentage. Okay, so this one I've got, it says representing percents in a grid. So hopefully on your computer you can kind of see the grid lines there. There's those little white lines that we're going to fill in. So when I'm looking at my hundreds grid, okay, if I wanted to show that 65% in a hundreds grid, so the whole thing represents 100%. But I only want 65%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to color in 65 of my 100 squares. So if I was to color in 65, I'm going to try and see if I can get a better tool for this. 65, here we go. Okay, so 65, I've colored in now, this is 50 of my squares, and I need to color in total 65 of them. So I got to do 10 more. Okay, and then I would need to color in 5 more little squares here. So of the 100 squares I started with, 65 of them are now colored in. Okay, so there's my 65%. Okay, if I was to do another percent, let's say 27%, I have this box of 100 squares. 27% means 27 out of 100. So out of these 100 squares, I'm going to color in, there's 20 of them colored in now, and I need to do 7 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. So now I've colored in 27 out of 100 squares. Okay, so that's just showing my percentage in a hundreds grid. Okay, so when we're thinking of percent, we're thinking of it as something out of 100. Now, you probably did that in grade 7, and here's what we're adding on in grade 8. So in grade 8, what I'm going to add on now is I want to show half of a percent in a hundreds grid. So let's be careful of how we're saying that. I want to have half of a percent. This means that I'm not even filling in one square fully. I really only want to fill in half of a square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one little square here like this, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to blow that square up. I'm going to make it bigger. That's my square. I don't even have that full square colored in. I only have half of that square filled in. So I split that square in half, and I would color in only half of that square. So my half of a percent means I have half of one small square. I don't fill in the whole thing. I would only color in half of it. Okay, let's do another one. So show 3/4 of a percent in a hundreds grid. So 3/4 of 1%. Again, I don't have a full percent. I have 3/4 of a percent. Sorry, I didn't really circle that square very well. I have 3/4 of a percent, which means I'm going to blow that square up, and I'm going to split it into 4 pieces, because 4 is the denominator in my fraction. And I'm going to color in 3 of those 4 pieces, because that will represent 3/4 of my one small percent. Okay, so 0.75% means 3/4 of one small square is filled in. Notice if you look at my big hundreds grid, I did not color in 3/4 of all the squares. I zoomed in on one small square and colored in 3/4 of that. Okay, so I have those fractional percents, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to include them with a whole number portion. So if I wanted to show 50.25% in a hundreds grid, I would need to start out by coloring in 50 full ones. So there's 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So I've colored in my 50%. And then I have my fractional portion, which is 1/4. So I'm going to take my 1 small percent and zoom in on that box. And I'm going to split it into 4 pieces because that's what the denominator is. And then I'm going to color in 1 of those 4 pieces. So I have now shaded in 50 full squares and then 1/4 of another square. So I have shown 50 and 1/4%. Okay. For the next one, 9 and 7/8. Okay, so I got to color in 9 squares fully. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'll stop just before that 10th one. And on that 10th one, I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to show my 7/8. Okay, so we'll zoom in on that square and we need to make it 7/8. Okay, so this one I'm going to split into 8 pieces. So there's 2 pieces, 4 pieces, and I could just split it again down the middle to turn it into 8 equal pieces. So I've split my 1% into 8 pieces, and I'm going to color in 7 of those 8 pieces. Okay, and that will be my 7/8. All right, so now I've colored in 9 full percent here, and then I've colored in, I zoomed in on this one small piece, and I color in 7 out of those 8 pieces. Okay, so we have percents that are smaller than 1. Okay, we have percents that are smaller than 1, and we'll often be working with percents smaller than 1 when we're talking about things in science, or if you're looking at concentrations of a chemical in water, that would be a great spot where you might have a percentage that is smaller than 1. But we also have percents that are bigger than 100. Okay, now we always say percent means out of 100, so this is a little bit weird to say that we can have something bigger. But you've probably heard before somebody said, give it 110%. What do they mean by that? Well, I would have to color in all 100 in this block. All 100% is colored in, but I still haven't done enough. Okay, if I have to give 110%, it means give absolutely everything you have, and then a little bit extra. So if I needed to do 110%, I would actually need 2 hundreds grids because I have to color in 100 full pieces and then 10 more pieces on top of that. And that would be 110%. If I wanted to color in 325%, well, all 300 means I need to fill in 300 squares fully, so I'm not filling them in as good as you guys can because I'm using digital tools, so you guys can actually fill them in a little better. So there's 300. I colored in 100 here, and then I colored in 200, and then 300, and I still need 25 more percent. So I would color in 25 more boxes. So there's my 20, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So there's 325%. Okay, so we have percents that are bigger than 100 as well. Okay, where you might see something like that is if you were to look on, if you were to go to the grocery store and buy like a really healthy smoothie, it might tell you that you're going to get 150% of your daily vitamin C, which means you get all the vitamin C you would need in your day, plus 50% extra. So you're getting more than you would really need. Now, it is possible to also have decimals. Okay, so with decimals, I'm actually going to do it really similar to how I had my fractions. So 26.1, I'm going to color in my 26. Okay, so here's 26. Now, we have bad habits, and I'm certainly guilty of this. I say 26.1, but what I should really be saying is I should say the decimal place properly. This number is 26 and 1/10. So I'm going to zoom in on one of these spots to show my extra 0.1 or 1/10. So if I say this out loud, it's 26 and 1/10. And when I say 1/10, I could write that as a fraction, and that's 1/10. So that would mean I need to split my block into 10 pieces, and I'm going to color in a single piece. Okay, so there's 26.1, or 26 and 1/10. If I was to do the next one, show 2.52% in a hundredths grid. So again, if I say this decimal place properly, that 2 is in the hundredths position. So that would mean I'm going to color in 2 boxes fully, right? Because my 2 out front, I color in the 2 boxes fully. And then I'm going to zoom in on one of those smaller boxes, and I'm actually going to zoom in onto another hundreds grid because it's already split for me, and I'm going to color in 52 hundredths. So this is not a percent. This one here is zooming in on one of my small percent squares, and I'm going to color in 52 of them. Okay, so if I was to look, I'm filling in my 2% is here, and this is the 0.52% is here. That's what we've colored in. Okay, so that's how we represent percentages in hundreds grids.